Chapter 7 The Dual Mother Role. After the disappearance of the assailant, Chihuahua begins the following monologue. From the extreme ends of the continents, from the farthest lowlands, after having forsaken the palace of my father, I have been wandering aimlessly during 100 moons. Always pursued by my mad desire to find her who will understand, with jewels I have tempted many fair ones with kisses. I have tried to snatch the secret of their hearts. With acts of bravery I have conquered their admiration. He reviews the women he has known. Cheetah, the princess of my race. She is a little fool, vain as a peacock, having naught in her head but jewel and a perfume. The Tanan, the young peasant, bah, mere sow, no more than a breast and a stomach. Caring only for pleasure, and then Kima, the priestess, a true parrot, repeating hollow phrases learnt from the priests, all for show, without real education or sincerity, suspicious, poseur, and hypocrite. Alas, not one who understands me, not one who resembles me, not one who has a soul sister to mine. There is no one among them all who has known my soul, not one who could read my thought far from it, not one capable of seeking with me the luminous summits, or of spelling with me the superhuman word, love. Here Chihuahua himself says that his journeying and wandering is a quest for that other, and for the meaning of life which lies in union with her. In the first part of this work we merely hinted gently at this possibility. The fact that the seeker is a masculine and the sought for a feminine sex is not so astonishing, because of the chief object of unconscious transference is the mother, as has probably been seen from that which we have already learned. The daughter takes a male attitude towards the mother. The genesis of this adjustment can only be suspected in our case, because objective proof is lacking. Therefore let us rather be satisfied with inferences. She who will understand means the mother in the infantile language. At the same time it also means the life companion, as it is well known. The sex contrast concerns the libido. But little. The sex of the object plays a surprisingly slight role in the estimation of the unconscious. The object itself taken as an objective reality is but of slight significance. But it is of greatest importance whether the libido is transferred or introverted. The original concrete meaning of ephasin, to seize, or begraphin, to touch, allows us to recognize clearly the underside of the wish to find a conjugal person. But the upper intellectual half is also contained in it, and is to be taken into account at the same time. One might be inclined to assume this tendency if it were not that our culture, abused the same for the misunderstood woman, has become almost proverbial, which can only be the result of a wholly distorted valuation. On the one side, our culture undervalues most extraordinarily the importance of sexuality. On the other side, sexuality breaks out as a direct result of the repression burdening it at every place where it does not belong, and makes use of such as indirect manner of expression that one may expect to meet it suddenly almost anywhere. Thus the idea of the intimate comprehension of human soul, which is in reality something very beautiful and pure, is soiled and disagreeably distorted through the entrance of the indirect sexual meaning. The secondary meaning, or better expressed, the misuse which repressed and denied sexuality forces upon the highest soul function, makes it impossible. For example, for certain of our opponents, the sentence psychoanalysis, purent erotic confessionals. These are subjective wish fulfillment deliria, which need no contra-arguments. This misuse makes the wish to be understood. Highly suspicious if the natural demands of life have not been fulfilled. Nature has first claim on man, only long afterwards does the luxury of intellect come. The medieval idea of life, for the sake of death, needs gradually to be replaced by a natural conception of life, which the normal demands of men are fairly kept in mind, so that the desires of the animal sphere may no longer be compelled to drag down into their service this higher gifts of the intellectual sphere in order to find an outlet. We are inclined therefore to consider the dreamer's wish for understanding first of all as a repressed striving towards the natural destiny. This meaning coincides absolutely with the psychoanalytic experience that there are countless neurotic people who apparently are prevented from experiencing life because they have an unconscious and often also a conscious repugnance to the sexual fate, under which they imagine all kinds of ugly things. There is only too great an inclination to yield to this pressure of the unconscious sexuality and to experience the dreaded unconsciously hoped for disagreeable sexual experience, so as to acquire by that means a legitimately founded horror which retains them more surely in the infantile situation. This is the reason why so many people fall into that very state towards which they have the greatest abhorrence. That we were correct in our assumption that in Miss Miller it is a question of the battle for independence is shown by her statement that the hero departure from his father's house reminds her of the fate of a young Buddha who likewise renounced all luxury to which he was born in order to go out into the world to live out his destiny to its completion. Buddha gave the same heroic example as did Christ, who separated from his mother and even spoke bitter words. Think not that I come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Or Luke chapter 7. Suppose ye that I am come to give peace on earth? I tell you, nay, but rather division. For from henceforth there shall be 5 in one household divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. The father shall be divided against the son, and the son against the father, the mother against the daughter against the mother-in-law against the daughter-in-law, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Horus snatched from his mother her head adornment, the power. Just as Adam struggled with Lilith, so he struggles for power. Nazich and human all too human express the same in very beautiful words. One may suppose that a mind in which the type of a free mind is to ripen and sweeten at maturity has had its decisive crisis in a great detachment, so that before this time it was just so much the more a fettered spirit and appeared chained forever to its corner and its pillar. What binds it most firmly? What cords are almost unterrible? Among human beings of a high and exquisite type, it would be duties, that reverence which is suitable for youth, that modesty and tenderness for all the old honored and valued things, that thankfulness for the earth for which they grew, for the hand which guided them, for the shrine where they learnt to pray. Their loftiest moments themselves come to bind them the firmest, to obligate them to the most permanently. The great detachment comes suddenly for people so bound. Better to die than to live here. Thus rings the imperative voice of seduction, and this here, this at home is all, and it is the soul has loved until now. A sudden terror and suspicion against that which it has loved, a lightning flash of scorn towards that which is called duty, a rebellious, arbitrary, volcanic, impelling desire for traveling, for strange countries, estrangements, coolness, frigidity, disillusionments, a hatred of love, perhaps a sacrilegious touch and glance backwards. There were just now it adored and loved, perhaps a blush of shame over what it had just done, and at the same time an exultation over having done it, an intoxicating, eternal, joyous thrill in which a victory reveals itself. A victory over what? Over whom? An enigmatic, doubtful, questioning victory, but the first triumph. Of such woe and pain is formed in a history of great detachment. It is like a disease which can destroy men. This first eruption of strength and will towards self-assertion. The danger lies, as is brilliantly expressed by Nietzsche, in isolation in oneself. Solitude surrounds and embraces him, ever more threatening, ever more constricting, ever more heart-strangling. The terrible goddess and mater siva cupaninium, the libido taken away from the mother, who is abandoned only reluctantly, becomes threatening as a serpent. The symbol of death for the relation of a mother must cease, must die, which itself almost causes man's death. In mater siva compendium, the idea attains rare, almost conscious perfection. I do not presume to try to paint in better words than has Nietzsche the psychology of a wrench from childhood. Miss Miller furnishes us with a further reference to a material which has influenced her creation in a more general manner. This is the great Indian epic of Longfellow, the Song of Hiawatha. If my readers have had patience to read thus far, and to reflect upon what they had read, they frequently must have wondered at the number of times I introduced for comparison such apparently foreign material, and how often I widen the base upon which Miss Miller's creation rests. Doubts must often arisen whether it is justifiable to enter into important discussions concerning the psychologic foundation of myths, religion, and culture in general on the basis of such scanty suggestions. It might be said that behind the Miller fantasies such a thing is scarcely to be found. I need hardly emphasize the fact that I too have sometimes been in doubt. I had never read Hiawatha until in the course of my work I came to this part. Hiawatha, a poetical compilation of Indian myths, gives me, however, a justification for all preceding reflections, because this epic contains an unusual number of mythologic problems. This fact is probably of great importance for the wealth of suggestions in the Miller fantasies. We are therefore compelled to obtain an insight into this epic. Nawadara signs the song of the epic of the hero Hiawatha, the friend of man. There he sang of Hiawatha, sang the songs of Hiawatha, sang his wondrous birth and being, how he prayed and how he fasted, how he lived and toiled and suffered, that the tribes of men might prosper, that he might advance his people. The telegraphic meaning of the hero is that symbolic figure which unites in itself libido in the form of admiration and adoration, in order to lead to higher sublimations by way of the symbolic bridges of the myths, is anticipated here. Thus we become quickly acquainted with Hiawatha as a savior, and are prepared to hear all that which must be said of a savior, of his marvelous birth, of his early great deeds, and his sacrifice for his fellow men. The first song begins with a fragment of evangelism. Gitch Manito, the master of life, tried of the quarrels of his human children, calls his people together and makes known to them the joyous message. I will send a prophet to you, a deliverer of the nations, who shall guide you and shall teach you, who shall toil and suffer with you. If you listen to his counsels, you will multiply and prosper. If his warnings pass unheeded, you will fade away and perish. Giltish Manito the mighty, the creator of the nations, is represented as he stood erect on the great red pipestone quarry. From his footprints flowed a river, leaped into the light of morning, o'er the precipice plunging downward, gleamed like Iskatuk the comet. The water flowing from his footsteps sufficiently proven the phallic nature of his creator. I refer to the earlier utterances concerning the phallic and fertilizing nature of a horse's foot and the horse's steps, and especially do I call Hippocrates and the foot of Pegasus. We meet with the same idea in Psalms. Thou visit the earth, and waterest it, thou makest it very plenteous. The river of God is full of water, thou preparest for corn, for so thou providest for the earth. Thou waterest her furrows, thou sendest rain into the little valleys thereof. Thou makest it soft with the drops of rain, and blessed the increase of it. Thou crownest the year with thy goodness, and thy path drop fatness. Wherever the fertilizing God steps for his fruitfulness. We already have spoken of the symbolic meaning of treading in discussing the nightmares. Kainus passes into the depths, splitting the earth with a foot outstretched. Amphiaraus, another chthonic hero, sinks into the earth, which Zeus has opened for him by a stroke of lightning. Compare with that the above-mentioned vision of a hysterical patient who saw a black horse after a flash of lightning, identity of a horse footsteps and flash of lightning. By means of a flash of lightning, heroes were made immortal. Phos attained the mothers when he stamped his foot. Stamp and descend, stamping vow to rise again. The heroes in the sun-devouring myths often stamp at or struggle in the jaws of a monster. Thus Thor stamped through the ship's bottom in battle with the monster and went as far as the bottom of the sea. Kainus concerning kicking as an infantile fantasy, see above. The regression of the libido to the pre-sexual stage makes this preparatory action of treading either a substitution for the coitus fantasy or for the fantasy of re-entrance into the mother's womb. The comparison of water flowing from the footsteps of a comet is a light symbolism for the fructifying moisture or sperm. According to an observation by Humboldt or Cosmos, certain South African American tribes call the stamp and descend, stamping thou rise again. The heroes in the sun-devouring myths often stamp at or struggle in the jaws of a monster. Thus Thor stamped through the ship's bottom in battle with the monster and went as far as the bottom of the sea. Kainus. Concerning kicking as an infantile fantasy, see above. The regression of a libido to the pre-sexual stage makes this preparatory action of treading either a substitution for the coitus fantasy or for the fantasy of re-entrance into the mother's womb. The comparison of the water flowing from the footsteps of a comet is a light symbolism for the fructifying moisture or sperm. According to an observation by Humboldt, certain South American Indian tribes call the meteors urine of the stars. Mention is also made of how Gitch Manito makes fire. He blows upon a forest so that the trees rubbing upon each other burst into flame. This demon is therefore an excellent libido symbol. He also produces fire. After this prologue in the second song, the hero's previous history is related. The great warrior, Mudgeweek's Hiawatha's father, has cunningly overcome the great bear, the terror of the nations, and stolen from him the magic belt of warm-up, a griddle of shells. Here we meet the modem of treasure attained with difficulty if the hero resurrects from the monster. Who the bear is shown by the poet's comparisons. Mudgeweek strikes the bear on his head after he was robbed him of the treasure. With the heavy blow bewildered rose the great bear of the mountains, but his knees beneath him trembled, and he whimpered like a woman. Mudgeweek said deservingly to him, else you would not cry and whimper like a miserable woman. But you, bear, sit here and whimper and disgrace your tribe by crying, like a wretched Shagadwaya, like a cowardly old woman. These three comparisons with a woman are to be found near each other on the same page. Mudgeweeks has, like a true hero, once more torn life from the jaws of death, from the all-devouring terrible mother. This deed, which as we have seen, is also represented as a journey to hell, night journey through the sea. The conquering of a monster from within signifies at the same time entrance into the mother's womb, a rebirth, the results of which are precipitable also for the Mudgeweeks. As in a Zosimos vision, here too the entering one becomes the breath of the winter spirit. M becomes the west winds, the fertilizing breath, the father of winds. His sons become the other winds. An intermezzo tells of them that their love stories, of which I will mention only the courtship of Wabuns, the east wind, because for the erotic wooing of the wind is pictured in an especially beautiful manner. Every morning he sees a beautiful girl in the meadow whom he eagerly counts. Every morning, gazing earthwards still, the first thing he beheld there was the blue eyes looking at him. 2 blue lakes among the rushes. The comparison with water is not a matter of the secondary importance, because from wind and water shall man be born anew. And he wooed her with caresses, wooed her with a smile of sunshine. With his flattering words he wooed her, with his sighing and his singing, gentleness whispers in the branches, softest music, sweetest odors, etc. In these onomatopoetic verses, the wind's caressing courtship is excellently expressed. The third song presents the previous history of Hiawatha's mother. His grandmother, when a maiden, lived in the moon. There she once swung upon a liana, but a jealous lover cut off the liana, and Nokomis, Hiawatha's grandmother, fell to earth. The people who saw her fall downwards thought that she was a shooting star. This marvelous descent of Nokomis is more plainly illustrated by a later passage of the same song. There little Hiawatha asked a grandmother what is the moon. Nokomis teaches him about it as follows. The moon is the body of a grandmother whom a warlike grandson has cast up there in wrath. Hence the moon is the grandmother. In ancient beliefs the moon is also the gathering place of departed souls. The guardian of seas, therefore, once more a place of the origin of life of predominantly feminine significance. The remarkable thing is that Nokomis falling upon the earth gave birth to a daughter, Winona, subsequently the mother of Hiawatha. The throwing upwards of a mother and her falling down and bringing forth seemed to contain something typical in itself. Thus the story of the 17th century relates that a mad bull threw a pregnant woman as high as a house, and tore open her womb, and the child fell without harm upon the earth. On account of his wonderful birth, this child was considered a hero or doer of miracles, but he died at an early age. The belief is widespread among lower savages that the sun is feminine and the moon masculine. Among the Namaka, a Hottentot tribe, the opinion is prevalent that the sun consists of transportation beacon. The people who journey on boats draw it down by magic every evening, cut off a suitable piece, and then give it a kick so that it flies up again into the sky. Waits, Anthropology 2, 342. The infantile nourishment comes from the mother. In the Gnostic fantasies we come across the legend of the origin of man, which possibly belongs there. The female anchors bound to the vault of heaven and unable on account of its quick rotation to keep their young with him. But let them fall upon the earth, from which men arise. Probably there is here a connection with barbaric midwifery, the letting fall of the prurient. The assault upon the mother is already introduced with the adventure of Mudjik Weeks, and is continued in the violent handling of the grandmother. Nokomis, who is a result of the cutting of the liana and the fall downwards, seems in some way to have become pregnant. The cutting of a branch, the plucking we have already recognized as mother incest. That well-known verse sacks the land where beautiful maidens grow upon trees, and phrases like picking cherries in a neighbor's garden allude to a similar idea. The fall downwards in Nokomis deserves to be compared to a poetical figure in Heine. A star is falling. Out of a glittering sky. The star of love I watch it, sink in the depths and die. The leaves and buds are falling for many an apple tree. I watched the mithril breezes embrace them wantonly. Winona later was courted by the caressing west wind, and becomes pregnant. Winona, as a young moon goddess, has the beauty of the moonlight. Nokomis warns her of the dangerous courtship of Mudjik Weeks, the west wind, but Winona allows herself to become infatuated, and conceives from the breath of the wind for a son our hero, and the west wind came at evening. Found the beautiful Winona lying there amid in the lilies. wooed her with his words of sweetness, wooed her with his soft caresses, till she bore a son in sorrow, bore a son of love and sorrow. Fertilization through the breath of the spirit is already a well-known precedent for us. The star or comet plainly belongs to the birth scene as a libido symbol. Nokomis too comes to earth as a shooting star. Marique's sweet poetic fantasy has devised a similar divine origin. And she who bore me in her womb and gave me food and clothing, she was a maid, a wild brown maid who loomed on men with loathing. She fleered at them and laughed out loud and bade no suitor tarry. I'd rather be the wind's own bride than have a man and marry. Then came the wind and held her fast, his captive love enchanted, and lo by him a merry child within her womb was planted. Buddha's marvelous birth story, retold by Sir Edwin Arnold, also shows traces of this. Maya the queen dreamed a strange dream, dreamed that a star from heaven, splendid six-raised in color rosy pearl, whereof the token was an elephant, six-tusked and white as milk of Kamkaduk, shot through the void and shining into her entered her womb upon the right. During Maya's conception a wind blows over the land. A wind blew with unknown freshness over lands and seas. After the birth, the four genii of the east, west, south, and north come to render service as bearers of the planetkin. The coming of the wise men at Christ's birth. We also find here a distinct reference to the four winds. For the completion of the symbolism there is to be found in the Buddha myth as well as in the birth legend of Christ, besides the impregnation by star and wind, also the fertilization by an animal, here an elephant, which with its phallic trunk fulfilled in Maya the Christian method of fructification for the ear or the head. It is well known that in addition to the dove, the unicorn is also a procreative symbol of the Logos. Here arises the question why the birth of a hero always had to take place under such strange symbolic circumstances. It might also be imagined that a hero arose from ordinary surroundings and gradually grew out of his inferior environment, perhaps with 1,000 troubles and dangers. And indeed this motive is by no means strange in the hero myth. It might be said that superstition demands strange conditions of birth and generation. Why does it demand them? The answer to this question is that the birth of a hero, as a rule, is not that of an ordinary mortal, but is a rebirth from the mother's spouse, hence it occurs under mysterious ceremonies. Therefore in the very beginning lies the motive of the two mothers of a hero. As Frank has shown us through many examples, the hero is often obliged to experience exposure and upbringing by foster parents, and in this manner he acquires the two mothers. A striking example is the relation of Hercules to Hera. In the Hiawathan epic, when Noah dies after the birth, and Nokomis takes her place. Maya dies after the birth, and Buddha is given a stepmother. The stepmother is sometimes an animal, the she-wolf of Romulus and Remus. The twofold mother may be replaced by the motive of twofold birth, which was attained a lofty significance in the Christian mythology, namely through baptism, which as we have seen represents rebirth. Thus man is born not merely in a commonplace manner, but also born again in a mysterious manner, by means of which he becomes a participator of the kingdom of God of immortality. Anyone may become a hero in this way, one who is generated anew through his own mother. It is only through her does he share in immortality. Therefore it happened that the death of Christ on this cross, which creates universal salvation, was understood as baptism. That is to say, as rebirth through the second mother of the mysterious tree of death, Christ says, "But I have a baptism to the baptized, with how am I straightened till it be accomplished." He interprets his death agony symbolically as birth agony. The motive of the two mothers suggests a thought of self-rejuvenation and evidently expresses the fulfillment of a wish that it might be possible for the mother to bear me again at the same time applied to the heroes. It means one is a hero who is born again by her who had previously been his mother, that is to say, a hero is he who may again produce himself through his mother. The countless suggestions in the history of a procreation of the heroes indicate the latter formulations. Hiawatha's father first overpowered the mother under the symbol of a bear. Then himself becoming a god, he procreates the hero. What Hiawatha had to do as a hero, Nokomis hinted to him in the legend of the origin of the moon. He is forcibly to throw his mother upwards or throw downwards. Then she would become pregnant by this act of violence and could bring forth a daughter. This rejuvenated mother would be allotted according to the Egyptian rite as a daughter-wife to the sun god, the father of his mother for self-reproduction. What action Hiawatha takes in the regard we shall see presently. We have already studied the behavior of a pre-existent god related to Christ. Concerning the pre-existence of Christ, the Gospel of St. John is full of this thought, thus this speech of John the Baptist. This is he who I am. After me cometh a man which is preferred before me, for he was before me. Also, the beginning of the Gospel is full of deep mythologic significance. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. The same came for a witness to bear witness of the light. He was not that light, but he was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. This is the proclamation of the reappearing light, the reborn sun, which formerly was, and which will be again. In the baptistry at Pisa, Christ is represented bringing the tree of life to man. His head is surrounded by a sun halo. Over this relief stands the word Intruus Solus. Because the one born was his own procreator, the history of his procreation is strangely concealed under symbolic events, which are meant to counsel and deny it. Hence the extraordinary assertion of a virgin conception. This is meant to hide the incestuous impregnation, but do not let us forget that the naive assertion plays an unusually important part in the ingenious symbolic bridge, which is to guide the libido out from the incestuous bond to higher and more useful applications which indicate a new kind of immortality, that is to say, immortal work. The environments of Hiawatha youth is of importance. By the shore of Gitchgumi, by the shining big sea waters, stood the wigwam of Nokomis, daughter of the moon Nokomis. Dark behind it rose the forest. Rose the black and gloomy pine trees, rose the thirds of cones upon them. Bright before it beat the water, beat the clear and sunny water, beat the shining big sea water. In this environment Nokomis brought him up. Here she taught him the first words and told him the first fairy tale, and the sounds of the water and the wood were intermingled, so that the child learned not only to understand man's speech, but also that of nature. At the door on summer evening sat the little Hiawatha, heard the whispering of the pine trees, heard the lapping of the water, sounds of music, words of wonder. Minnie-Wawa said the pine trees, Mudway-Akusha said the water. Hiawatha hears human speech and the sounds of nature, thus he understands nature's speech. The wind says wah-wah, the cry of a wild goose is wah-wah. Wawa Taisi means the small glowworm which enchants him. Thus the poet paints most beautifully the gradual gathering of external nature into the compass of the subjective. and the intimate connection of a primary object to which the first lisping words were applied, and from which the first sounds were derived, with a secondary object. The wider nature which usurps imperceptibly the mother's place, and takes possession of those sounds heard first from the mother, and also those feelings which we all discover later in ourselves, and all the warm love of Mother Nature. The latter blending, whether pantheistic, philosophic, or aesthetic, or the sentimental, cultured man with nature is looked at retrospectively, a reblending with the mother, who was our primary object and with whom we truly were once wholly one. Therefore, it is not astonishing when we again see, emerging in the poetical speech of a modern philosopher, Carl Jung, the old picture which symbolizes the unity with the mother, illustrated by the confluence of subject and object. In his recent book, Seal Unwelt, Joel writes as follows in the chapter called Primal Experience. I lay on the seahorse, the shining waters glistening in my dreamy eyes. At a great distance fluttered the soft breeze. Throbbing, shimmering, stirring, lulling to sleep, comes the wave beat to the shore or to the ear. I know not. Distance and nearness become blurred into one. Without and within glide into each other. Nearer and nearer, dearer and more home-like sound the beating of the waves. Now like a thundering pulse in my head it strikes, and now it beats over my soul, devours it, embraces it while itself at the same time floats out like the blue waste of waters. Yes, with and without one, glistening and foaming, flowing and fanning, and roaring, the entire sympathy of the stimuli experience sounds in one tone. All thought becomes one thought, which becomes one with feeling. The world exhales in the soul, and the soul dissolves in the world. Our small life is encircled by a great sleep, the sleep of our cradle, the sleep of our grave, the sleep of our home, from which we go forth in the morning, to which we again return in the evening. Our life but the short journey, the interval between the emergence from the original oneness and the sinking back into it. Blue shimmers the infinite sea, wherein dreams the jellyfish of a primitive life, toward which, without seizing our thoughts, hark back dimly through eons of existence. For every happening entails a change and a guarantee of the unity of life. At that moment, when they are no longer blended together in that instant, man lifts his head, blind and tripping from the depths of the stream experience. From the oneness with the experience at that moment of parting, when the unity of life is startled, surprise detaches the change, and holds its way and itself in something alien at this moment of alienation. The aspects of the experience have been substantialized into subject, an object, and in the moment consciousness is born. Joel paints here in unmistakable symbolism the confluence of subject and object as the reunion of mother and child. These symbols agree with those of mythology, even in their details. The encircling and devouring motive is distinctly suggested, the sea devouring the sun and giving birth to it anew, is already an old acquaintance. The moment of a rise of consciousness, the separation of subject and object, is a birth. Truly philosophical thought hangs with lame wings upon the few great primitive pictures of human speech. Above the simple, all-surpassing greatness of which no thought can rise. The idea of the jellyfish is not accidental. Once when I was explaining to a patient the maternal significance of water at this contact with the mother complex, she experienced a very unpleasant feeling. It makes me squirm, she says, as if I touched a jellyfish. Here, too, the same ideal, the blessed state of sleep before birth and after death is, as Joel observed, something like old shadowy memories of that unsuspecting, thoughtless state of early childhood, where as yet no opposition disturbed the peaceful flow of dawning life, to which the inner longing always draws us back again and again, and from which the active life must free itself anew of struggle and death. so that it may not be doomed to destruction. Long before Joel, an Indian chieftain, had the same thing in similar words to one of the restless wise men. Ah, my brother, you will never learn to know the happiness of thinking. Nothing and doing nothing. This is next to sleep. This is the most delightful thing there is. Thus we were before birth, thus we shall be after death. We shall see in Hiawatha's later fate how important his early impressions are in his choice of a wife. Hiawatha's first deed was to kill a roebuck with his arrow. Dead he lay there in the forest by the ford across the river. This is typical of Hiawatha's deeds. Whatever he kills for the most part lies next to or in the water, sometimes half in the water and half on the land. It seemed that this must well be so. The later adventures will teach us why this must be so. The buck was no ordinary animal, but a magic one. That is to say, one with an additional unconscious significance. Hiawatha made for himself gloves and moccasins from his hide. The gloves imparted such strength to his arms that he could crumble rocks to dust, and the moccasins had the virtue of his 7-league boots. By unwrapping himself in the buck's skin, he really became a giant. This motive together with the death of the animals at the ford in the water reveals the fact that the parents are concerned, whose gigantic proportions as compared with the child are of great significance in the unconscious. The Toys of Giant is a wish inversion of the infantile fantasy. The dream of an 11-year-old girl expresses this: I am as high as a church steeple. Then a policeman comes, I'll tell him. If you say anything, I will cut off your head. The policeman, as the analysis brought out, referred to the father whose gigantic size was overcompensated by the church steeple. In Mexican human sacrifices, the gods were represented by criminals who were slaughtered and flayed. And the Corybantes then clothed themselves in the bloody skins in order to illustrate the resurrection of the gods. The snake's casting of the skin as a symbol of rejuvenation. Hiawatha has therefore conquered his parents, primarily the mother, although in the form of a male animal. Compare the bear of the Mudgeweeks, and from that comes his giant strength. He has taken on the parent's skin, and now has himself become a great man. Now he started forth to his first great battle to fight with the father of the Mudgeweeks, in order to avenge his dead mother Winona. Naturally, under this figure of speech hides the thought that he slays the father in order to take possession of the mother. Compare the battle of Gilgamesh with the giant Chubaba and the ensuing conquest of Istar. The father in the psychologic sense merely represents the personification of the incest prohibition, that is to say, resistance which defends the mother. Instead of a father, it may be a fearful animal, the great bear, the snake, the dragon, etc., which must be fought and overcome. The hero is a hero because he sees in every difficulty the resistance of the forbidden treasure, the fight that resistance of the completely yearning which strives toward the treasure, attainable with difficulty, or unattainable, the yearning which paralyzes and kills the ordinary man. Hiawatha's father is Mudgeweeks the West Wind. The battle therefore takes place in the west. Thence came life, impregnation of Winona. Thence also came death, death of Winona. Hiawatha therefore fights the typical battle of a hero for rebirth in the western sea, the battle of the devouring terrible mother, this time in the form of a father. Mudgeweeks, who himself has acquired a divine nature through his conquest of the bear, now is overpowered by his son. Back retreated Mudgeweeks, rushing westward o'er the mountains, stumbling westward down the mountains, 3 whole days retreated fighting, still pursued by Hiawatha to the doors of the west wind, to the portals of the sunset, to the earth's remotest border, where into the empty spaces sinks the sun as a flamingo drops into her nest at nightfall. The 3 days are a stereotype form representing the stay in the sea prison of a night. 21st until 24th of December. Christ too remained 3 days in the underworld. The treasure difficult to attain is captured by the hero during the struggle in the West. In this case, the father must make a great concession to the son. He gives him divine nature, the very wind nature, the immortality of which alone protected Mudgeweek from death. He says to his son, "I will share my kingdom with you. Ruler shall you be henceforth of the northwest wind, Keewaydin, off home again, the Keewaydin." That Hiawatha now became ruler of the home wind has its close parallel in the Gilgamesh epic, where Gilgamesh finally receives the magic herb from the wise old Utomanism, who dwells in the west, which brings him safe once more over the sea to his home. But this when he is home again is retaken from him by a serpent. When one has slain the father, one can obtain possession of his wife, and when one has conquered the mother, one can free oneself. On the return journey, Hiawatha stops at the clever arrow maker's, who possesses a lovely daughter, and he named her from the river. From the waterfall he named her Minima Laughing Water. When Hiawatha, in his earliest childhood dreaming, felt the sounds of water and wind press upon his ears, he recognized in these sounds of nature the speech of his mother. The murmuring pine trees on the shore of the great sea said Miniwa, and above the murmuring of the winds and the splashing of the water he found his earliest childhood dreams once again in a woman. Minnehaha, the laughing water, and the hero before all others finds in a woman the mother in order to become a child again. And finally, to solve the riddle of immortality. The fact that Minnehaha's father is a skillful arrow maker betrays him as the father of a hero, and the woman he had with him as the mother. The father of a hero is very often a skillful carpenter or other artisan. According to the Arabian legend Ter, Abraham's father was a skillful master workman who could carve arrows from any wood. That is to say, in the Arabian form of speech, he was a procreator of splendid sons. Moreover, he was a maker of images of gods. Vashur Agni's father is the maker of the world, a smith and carpenter, the discoverer of fire boring. Joseph, the father of Jesus, was also a carpenter. Likewise, Kinras, Adonis' father, who is said to have invented the hammer, the lever roofing and mining. Hephaestus, the father of Hermes, is an artistic master, workman, and sculptor. In fairy tales, the father of a hero is very modestly the traditional woodcutter. These conceptions were also alive in the cult of Osiris, where the divine image was carved out of a tree trunk and then placed with the hollow of a tree. In Rig Veda, the world was also hewn out of a tree by the world sculptor. The idea that the hero is his own procreator leads to the fact that he is invested with paternal attributes, and reversedly the heroic attributes are given to the father. In Mani there exists a beautiful union of the motives. He accomplishes his great labors as a religious founder, hides himself for years in a cave, he dies, is skinned, stuffed, and hung up as a hero. Besides, he is an artist. He has a crippled foot. A similar union of motives is found in Wyland the smith. Hiawatha kept silent about what he saw at the old arrow maker's on his return to Nokomis, and he did nothing further to win Minnehaha. But now something happened which, if it were not in an Indian epic, would rather be sought in the history of a neurosis. Hiawatha introverted his libido, that is to say, he fell into an extreme resistance against the real sexual demand. He built a hut for himself in the wood, in order to fast there and to experience dreams and visions. For the first 3 days he wandered as one in his earliest youths through a forest and looked at all the animals and plants. Master of life, he cried, desponding, must our lives depend on these things? The question whether our lives must depend upon these things is very strange. It sounds as if life were derived from these things, that is to say, from nature in general. Nature seems suddenly to have assumed a very strange significance. This phenomenon can be explained only through the fact that a great amount of libido is stored up and is now given to nature. As is well known, men of even dull and prosy minds in the springtime of love suddenly become aware of nature and even make poems about it. But we know that libido, prevented from an actual way of transference, always reverts to an earlier way of transference. Minnehaha of the laughing water is so clearly an allusion to the mother that the secret yearning for the hero for the mother is powerfully touched. Therefore, without having undertaken anything, he goes home to Nokomis, but there again he is driven away because Minnehaha already stands in his path. He turns therefore even further away into the early youthful period, the tones of which recall Minnehaha most forcibly to his thoughts, where he learnt to hear the mother sounds and the sounds of nature. In this very strange revival of the impressions of nature, we recognize a regression of those earliest and strongest nature impressions, which stand next to the subsequent and distinguished even stronger. Impressions with the child received from the mother, the glamour of his feeling for her child is transferred to other objects of a childish environment, father's house playthings, etc., from which later those magic, blissful feelings proceed, which seem to be peculiar to the earliest childish memories. When therefore Hiawatha hides himself in the lap of nature, it is really the mother's womb, and is to be expected that he will emerge again newborn in some form. Before turning to the new creation arising from introversion, there is still a further significance of the preceding question to be considered, whether life is dependent upon these things. Life may depend upon these things in the degree that they serve for nourishment. We must infer, in this case, that suddenly the question of nutrition came very near the hero's heart, the possibility of the thoughtly proven in what follows. The question of nutrition indeed enters seriously into consideration. First, because regression to the mother's necessarily revives that special path of transference, namely, that of nutrition through that of the mother. As soon as the libido regresses to the pre-sexual stage, there may expect to see the function of nutrition and its symbol put in place of the sexual function. Thence is derived an essential root of the displacement from below upwards, because in the pre-sexual stage the principal value belongs not to the genitals but to the mouth. Secondly, because the hero fasted, his hunger becomes predominant. Fasting, as is well known, is employed to silence. Sexuality also expresses symbolically the resistance against sexuality, translated into the language of a pre-sexual stage. On the fourth day of his fast, the hero ceased to address himself to nature. He lay exhausted, with half-closed eyes upon his couch, sunk deep in his dreams, the picture of extreme introversion. We have already seen that in such circumstances an infantile internal equivalent for reality appears in a place of external life and reality. This is also the case with Hiawatha. And he saw a youth approaching, dressed in garments green and yellow, coming through the purple twilight. Through the splendor of the sunset, plumes of green bent over his forehead, and his hair was soft and golden. This remarkable apparition reveals himself in the following manner to Hiawatha. From the masters of life descending, I, the friend of man, Mandamin, come to warn you and instruct you how by struggle and by labor you shall gain what you have paid for. Rise up from the bed of branches, rise, O youth, and wrestle with me. Mandamin is the maize, a god who is eaten, arising from Hiawatha's introversion. His hunger taken in a double sense, his longing for the nourishing mother gives birth from his soul to another hero, the edible maize, the son of the earth mother. Therefore he again arises at sunset, symbolizing the entrance into the mother, and in the western sunset glow, he begins again the mystic struggle with the self-created god, the god who has originated entirely from the longing for the nourishing mother. The struggle is again the struggle for liberation from this destructive and yet productive longing. Mandamin is therefore the equivalent of a mother, and the struggle with him means the overpowering and the impregnation of a mother. This interpretation is entirely proven by a myth of the Cherokees, who invoke it amaze under the name of the Old Woman, an allusion to a myth that is sprang from the blood of an old woman killed by her disobedient sons. Faint with famine, Hiawatha started from his bed of branches, from the twilight of his wigwam, forth into the flush of sunset, came and wrestled with Mondamin. At his touch he felt new courage, throbbing in his brain and bosom, felt new life and hope and vigor, run through every nerve and fiber. The battle at sunset with the god of maize gives Hiawatha new strength, and thus it must be, because of the fight for the individual depths against a paralyzing longing for the mother, gives creative strength to men. Here indeed is the source of all creation, but it demands heroic courage to fight against these forces and to wrest from them the treasure difficult to attain. He who succeeds in this has in truth attained the best. Hiawatha wrestles with himself for his creation. The struggle lasts again, the charmed 3 days. The 4th day, just as Mondamin prophesied, Hiawatha conquers him and Mondamin sinks to the ground his death. As Mondamin previously desired, Hiawatha digs his grave in Mother Earth, and soon afterwards from his grave the young and fresh maize grows for the nourishment of mankind. Concerning the thought of this fragment, we have therein a beautiful parallel to the mystery of Mithra, where first the battle of the hero with his bull occurs. Afterwards Mithra carries and transits the bull into the cave, where he kills him. From this death all fertility grows, all that is edible. The cave corresponds to the grave. The same idea is represented in the Christian mysteries, although generally in more beautiful human forms. The soul struggle of Christ in Gethsemane, where he struggles with himself in order to complete his work, then the transitus, the carrying of the cross, where he takes upon himself the symbol of the destructive mother, and therewith takes himself to the sacrificial grave, from which after 3 days he triumphantly arises. All these ideas express the same fundamental thought. Also, the symbol of eating is not lacking in the Christian mystery. Christ is a God who is eaten in the Lord's Supper. His death transformed him into bread and wine, which we partake of it in grateful memory of his great deed. The relation of Agni to the Sama drink and that of Dionysus to wine must not be omitted here. An evident parallel in Samson's rending of a lion and the subsequent inhabitation of a dead lion by honey bees, which give rise to the well-known German riddle. In the Eleusinian mysteries, these thoughts seem to have played a role. Besides Demeter and Persephone, Lacus is a chief god of the Eleusinian cult. He was the pure Atyrus, the eternal boy, of whom Ovid says the following. In the great Eleusinian festival procession, the image of Lacus was carried. It is not easy to say which god is Lacus, possibly a boy or a newborn son similar to the Etruscan Tages, who bears the surname the freshly plowed boy, because according to the myth he arose from a furrow of a field behind the peasant who was plowing. This idea shows unmistakably the Mondamin motive. The plow is of well-known phallic meaning. The furrow of the field is personified by the Hindus as a woman. The psychology of this idea is that of a coitus referred back to the pre-sexual stage of nutrition. The sun is the edible fruit of the field. Lacus passes in part as son of Demeter, or of Persephone, also appropriately as consort of Demeter, hero as procreator himself. He was identified with Dionysus, especially the Thracian Dionysus Zagreus, of whom a typical fate of rebirth was related. Hera had goaded the Titans against Zagreus, who, assuming many forms, sought to escape them until they finally took him, when he had taken on the form of a bull. In this form he was killed, or Mithra's sacrifice, and dismembered, and the pieces were thrown into a cauldron. But Zeus killed the Titans by lightning, and swallowed the still throbbing heart of Zagreus. Through this act he gave him existence once more, and Zagreus as Lacus again came forth. Lacus carries the torch, the phallic symbol of procreation, as Plato testifies. In the festival procession, the sheaf of corn, the cradle of Lacus, was carried. The Orphic legend relates that Lacus was brought up by Persephone when after 3 years' slumber he awoke. This statement distinctly suggests a Mondamin motive. The 20th of Badraman, the month Bordaman, lasts from about the 5th of September to the 5th of October, is called Lacus in honor of a hero. On the evening of this day, the great torchlight procession took place on the seashore, in which the quest and lament of Demeter was represented. The role of Demeter, who, seeking her daughter, wanders over the whole earth without food or drink, has been taken over by Hiawatha in the Indian epic. He turns to all created things without obtaining an answer. As Demeter first learns of her daughter from the subterranean Hecate, so does Hiawatha first find the one sought for Mondamin. In the deepest introversion descent to the mother, Hiawatha produces from himself Mondamin as a mother produces the son. The longing for the mother also includes the producing mother first devouring, then birth-giving. Concerning the real contents of the mysteries, we learn through the testimony of Bishop Astius about 390 A.D. the following. Is not there in Eleusinians the gloomiest descent and the most solemn communion of a hierophant and a priestess between him and her alone? As the torch is not extinguished, and does not the vast multitude regard as their salvation that which takes place between the two in the darkness? That points undoubtedly to a ritual marriage, which is celebrated subterraneously in Mother Earth. The priestess of Demeter seems to be the representative of the earth goddess, perhaps the pharaoh of the field. The descent into the earth is also the symbol of a mother's womb, and was a widespread conception under the sun of cave worship. Plutarch relates to the Magi that they sacrificed to Ahriman. Lucian lets the magician Mithrobares descend into the bowels of the earth. According to the testimony of Moses of the Quran, the sister fire and the brother spring were worshipped in Armenia in a cave. Julian gave an account from the Attis legend, from whence Sybil brings up her son lover, that is to say, gives birth to him. The cave of Christ's birth in Bethlehem, the house of bread, is said to have been an Attis spalium. A further Eleusinian symbol is found in the festival of Hierogamos, in the form of the mystic chests, which according to the testimony of Clemens of Alexandria may have contained pastry, salts, and fruits. The Symphoma confession of the mystic transmitted by Clemens is suggestive in still other directions. I have fasted, I have drunk of the barley drink, I have taken from the chest, and after I have labored I have placed it back in the basket, and from the basket into the chest. The question as to what lay in the chest is explained in detail by Dietrich. The labor he considers a phallic activity which the mystic has to perform. In fact, representations of the mystic basket are given, wherein lies a phallus surrounded by fruits. Upon the so-called Levitelli tomb vase, the sculptures of which are understood to be Eleusinian ceremonies, it is shown how a mystic caressed the serpent entwining Demeter. The caressing of a fear animal indicates a religious conquering of incest. According to the testimony of Clemens of Alexandria, a serpent was in the chest. The serpent in this connection is naturally of phallic nature. The phallus, which is forbidden in relation to the mother, Rode mentions that in Amphiopheres, pastry is the form of a phalli and serpents were thrown into the cave near the Thesmomorphion. This custom was a petition for the bestowal of children and harvest. The snake also plays a large part in initiations under the remarkable title. Clemens observes that the symbol of the Sabzios mysteries in the Orphic hymn 52, Bacchus, which indicates that the god enters into man as if through the female genitals. According to the testimony of Hippolytus, the Aerophant is in the mystery exclaimed, "The revered one has brought forth a holy boy, Brimos from Brimo." This Christmas gospel Unto us a son is born is illustrated especially through the tradition that the Athenians secretly show to the partakers in the Apodia the great and wonderful and most perfect epopic mystery, a mound stalk of wheat. The parallel for the motive of death and resurrection is the motive of losing and finding. The motive appears in religious rites is exactly the same connection, namely in spring festivals similar to the Hierogamos, where the image of a god was hidden and found again. It is an uncanonical tradition that Moses left his father's house when 12 years old to teach mankind. In a similar manner, Christ is lost by his parents, and they find him again as a teacher of wisdom, just as in the Mohammedan legend Moses and Joshua lose the fish, and in his place Chider, the teacher of wisdom, appears like the boy Jesus in the temple. So does the corn God lost and believed to be dead suddenly arise again from his mother into renewed youth. That Christ was laid in the manger and suggestive of fodder. Robertson therefore places the manger as parallel to the Lincoln. We understand from these accounts why the Eleusinian mysteries were for the mystics so rich in comfort for the hope of a better world. A beautiful Eleusinian epithet shows this. Truly a beautiful secret is proclaimed by the blessed gods. Mortality is not a curse, but death a blessing. The hymn of Demeter in the mysteries also says the same. Blessed is he, the earth-born man, who hath seen this, who hath not shared in these divine ceremonies. He hath an unequal fate in the obscure darkness of death. Immortality is inherent in the Eleusinian symbol. In a church song of the 19th century by Samuel Presswick, we discover it again. The world is yours, Lord Jesus, the world on which we stand, because it is thy world it cannot perish. Only the wheat before it comes up to the light in its fertility must die in the bosom of the earth, first freed from its own nature. Thou goest, O Lord, O Chief, to heaven through thy sorrows, and guide him who believes in three on the same path, and take us all equally to share in the sorrows and kingdom, guide us through thy gate of death, bring thy world into the light. Frimpus relates concerning the Attis mysteries. Such parallel shows us how little human personality and how much divine that is to say universally human is found in the Christ mystery. No man is or indeed ever was a hero, for the hero is a god, and therefore impersonal and generally applicable to all. Christ is a spirit, as is shown in the very early Christian interpretation. In different places of the earth in the most varied forms, and in the coloring of various periods, the Savior hero appears as a fruit of the entrance of a libido into the personal maternal depths. The Bacchian consecrations, represented upon a Farnese relief, contains a scene where a mystic wrapped in a mantle, drawn over his head which led to Selene, who holds the chalice covered with a cloth. The covering of the head signifies death. The mystic dies figuratively like the seed corn grows again and comes to the corn harvest. Proclus relates that the mystics were buried up to their necks. The Christian church as a place of religious ceremony is really nothing but the grave of a hero or the catacombs. The believer descends into the grave in order to rise from the dead with the hero. That the meaning underlying the church is that of a mother's womb can scarcely be doubted. The symbols of Mass are so distinct that the mythology of the sacred acts peeps out everywhere. It is the magic charm of rebirth. The veneration of the Holy Sepulchre is most plain in this respect. A striking example is the Holy Sepulchre of Saint Stefano in Bologna. The church itself is a very old, polygonal building consists of the remains of a temple. To Isis. The interior contains an artificial spalium, a so-called Holy Sepulchre, into which one creeps through a very little door. After a long sojourn, the believer reappears reborn from his mother's womb. An Etruscan ossuarium in the Archaeological Museum in Florence is at the same time a statue of Matuta, the goddess of death. The clay figure of the goddess is hollowed within as a receptacle of the ashes. The representations indicate that Matuta is the mother. Her chair is adorned of sphinxes, as fitting symbols for the Mother of Death. Holy Sepulchre of Estefano at Bologna. Only a few of the further deeds of Hiawatha can interest us here. Among these is the battle of Mishnama, the Fish King. In the 8th song, this deserves to be mentioned as a typical battle of a sun hero. Mishnama is a fish monster who dwells at the bottom of the waters. Challenged by Hiawatha to battle, he devours the hero together with his boat. In his wrath he darted upward, flashing, leaped into the sunshine, opened his great jaws, and swallowed both canoe and Hiawatha. Down into the darksome cavern plunged the heading Hiawatha. As a log on some black river shoots and plunges down the rapids, found himself in the utter darkness, groped about in helpless wonder, till he felt a great heart beating. Throbbing that utter darkness, and he smote it in his anger with his fist the heart of Nama. Felt the mighty king of fishes shudder through each nerve and fiber. Crosswise, then did Hiawatha drag his birch canoe for safety, lest from out of the jaws of Nama, if the turmoil and confusion, forth he might be hurled and perish. It is the typical myth of a work of a hero distributed over the entire world. He takes to a boat, fights with the sea monster, is devoured. He defends himself against being bitten or crushed. Resistance or stamping motive. Having arrived in the interior of the whale dragon, he seeks the vital organ, which he cuts off or in some way destroys. Often the death of the monster occurs as the result of a fire which the hero secretly makes within him. He mysteriously creates in the womb of death life the rising sun. Thus dies the fish, which drifts ashore, where with the assistance of birds the hero again attains the light of day. The bird in this sense probably means the reascent of the sun, the longing of the libido, the rebirth of the phoenix. The longing is very frequently represented by the symbol of hovering. The sun symbol of a bird rising from the water is etymologically contained in the singing swan. Swan is derived from the root sven, like sun and tone. See the preceding. This act signifies rebirth and the bringing forth of life from the mother, and by this means the ultimate destruction of death, which according to a Negro myth has come into the world through the mistake of an old woman, who at the time of the general casting of skins her men renewed their skin through casting their skin like snakes, drew on through absent-mindedness, her old skin instead of a new one, and as a result died. But the effect of such an act could not be of any duration. Again and again troubles of a hero are renewed, always under the symbol of deliverance from the mother. Just as Hera as the pursuing mother is the real source of the great deeds of Hercules, so does Nokomis allow Hiawatha no rest, and races up new difficulties in his path in form of desperate adventures in which the hero may perhaps conquer, but also perhaps may perish. The libido of mankind is always in advance of his consciousness. Unless his libido calls him forth to new dangers, he sinks into slothful inactivity, or on the other hand, childish longing for the mother overcomes him at the summit of his existence, and he allows himself to become pitifully weak, instead of striving with desperate courage towards the highest. The mother becomes the demon who summons the hero to adventure, and who places in his path a poisonous serpent which will strike him. Thus Nokomis in the 9th song calls Hiawatha, points with her hand to the west, where the sun sets in purple splendor, and says to him, Manito of wealth and wampum, guarded by his fiery serpents. Guarded by the black pitch water, you can see his fiery serpents, the Kennebeak, the great serpents, coiling, playing in the water. This danger lurking in the west is known to mean death, which no one, even the mightiest, escapes. This magician, as we learn, also killed the father of Nokomis. Now she sends her son forth to avenge the father Horus. For the symbols attributed to the magician, it may easily be recognized what he symbolizes. Snake and water belong to the mother. The snake as a symbol of a repressed longing for the mother, or in other words as a symbol of resistance, encircles protectingly and defensively by the maternal rock. Inhabits the cave, winds itself upwards, around the mother tree and guards the precious hoard, the mysterious treasure. The black Stygian water is like the black muddy spring of Deucalion, the place where the sun dies and enters into rebirth. The maternal sea of death and night. On his journey thither, Hiawatha takes him the magic oil of Mishnama, which helps his boat through the waters of death. Also a sort of charm for immortality, like the dragon's blood for Siegfried, etc. First Hiawatha slays the great serpent. Of a night journeying the sea over the Stygian waters it is written, all night long he sailed upon that sluggish water, covered with its mold of ages, black with rotting water rushes, rank with flags and leaves of lilies. Stagnant, lifeless, dreary, dismal, lighted by the shimmering moonlight, and by will of the wisps illuminated, fires by ghosts of dead men kindled in their weary night encampments. This description plainly shows the character of water of death. The contents of the water point to an already mentioned motive, that of encoiling and devouring. It is said in the Key of Dreams, Yagavita, whoever in dreams surrounds his body with bosks, creepers, or ropes with snake skins, threads, or tissues dies. I refer to the preceding arguments in regard to this. Having come into the Westland, the hero challenges the magician to battle. A terrible struggle begins. Hiawatha is powerless because Megasawan is invulnerable. At evening, Hiawatha retires wounded, despairing for a while in order to rest. Paused to rest beneath a pine tree from whose branches trailed the mosses, whose trunk was coated over with the dead man's moccasin leather with the fungus white and yellow. The protecting tree is described as coated over with the moccasin leather of the fungus. The investing of a tree with anthropomorphic attributes is also an important rite. Whatever tree worship prevails, as for example in India, where each village has its sacred tree, which is clothed and in general treated as a human being. The trees are anointed with fragrant waters, sprinkled with powder, adorned with garlands and draperies. Just as among men the piercing of the ears was performed as an anthropomorphic charm against death, so does it occur with the holy tree. Of all the trees of India, there is none more sacred to the Hindus than the Aswaphaficus religiosa. It is known to them as Virkashraha, king of trees. Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahasvir live in it, and the worship of it and the worship of a triad. Almost every Indian village has an aswapha, the village linden tree, well known to us, is here clearly characterized as the mother symbol. It contains the three gods. Hence, when Hiawatha retires to rest under the pine tree, it is a dangerous step because he resigns himself to the mother, whose garment is the garment of death, the devouring mother. As in the whale dragon, the hero also in this situation needs a helpful bird. That is to say, the helpful animal which represents the benevolent parents. Suddenly from the boughs above him sang the mama, the woodpecker. Aim your arrows, Hiawatha, at the head of Megasawan. Strike the tuft of hair upon it. At the roots, the long black tresses. There alone can he be wounded. Now assuming to relate, Mama hurried to his help. It is a peculiar fact that the woodpecker was also the mamma of Romulus and Remus, who put nourishment into the mouths of the twins with his beak. Compare with that the role of a vulture in Leonardo's dream. The vulture is sacred to Mars like the woodpecker. With the maternal significance of a woodpecker, the ancient Italian folk superstition agrees. That from the tree upon which the bird nested, any nail which has been driven in will soon drop out again. The woodpecker owes its special significance to the circumstances that he hammers holes into trees, to drive nails in as above. It is therefore understandable that he has made much of a Roman legend as an old king of the country. A possessor or ruler of a holy tree, the primitive image of a paterfamilias. An old fable relates how Circe, the spouse of King Picus, transformed him into the Picus maridus, the woodpecker. The sorceress is the new creating mother, who has magic influence upon the son husband. She kills him, transforms him into the soul bird, the unfulfilled wish. Picus was also understood as the wood demon and incubus, as well as the soothsayer, all of this which fully indicate the mother libido. Picus is also placed on par with Picamus by the ancients. Picamus is the inseparable companion of Pilminus, and both are actually called Infinitium Dei, the gods of little children. Especially it was said of Pilmus that he defended newborn children against the destroying attacks of a wood demon, Sylvanus, good and bad mother, the motive of the two mothers. The benevolent bird, a wish thought of deliverance which arises from introversion, advises the hero to shoot the magician under the hair, which is the only vulnerable spot. This spot is the phallic points, if one may venture to say, so it is at the top of the head, at the place where the mystic birth from the head takes place, which even today appears in children's sexual theories. In a vat, Hiawatha shoots, one may very naturally, 3 arrows. The well-known phallic symbol, and thus kills Megasawan. Thereupon he steals the magic wampum armor, which renders him invulnerable means of immortality. He significantly leaves the dead lying in the water because the magician is the fearful mother. On the shore he left the body, half on land and half in water. In the sands his feet were buried, and his face was in the water. Thus the situation is the same as with the Fish King, because the monster is the personification of the water of death, which in its turn represents the devouring mother. This great deed of Hiawatha's, where he has vanquished the mother as a death-bringing demon, is followed by his marriage with Minnehaha. A little fable which the poet has inserted in the later song is noteworthy. An old man is transformed into a youth by crawling through a hollow oak tree. In the 14th song, in a description of how Hiawatha discovers writing, I limit myself to description of 2 hieroglyphic tokens. Gitch Manito the Mighty, he the master of life, was painting as an egg, which with points projecting to the 4 winds of the heavens. Everywhere is the Great Spirit was the meaning of the symbol. The world lies in the egg which encompasses it at every point. It is the cosmic woman with child, the symbol of which Plato as well as the Vedas was made use of. This mother is like the air which is everywhere, but air is spirit, the mother of a world is a spirit. Mitch Manitow the Mighty, he the dreadful spirit of evil as serpent was depicted, as Kennebeek the great serpent. But the spirit of evil is fear, is the forbidden desire of the adversary who opposes not only each individual heroic deed, but life in its struggle for eternal duration as well, and who introduces into our body the poison of weakness and age through the treacherous bite of the serpent. It is all that is retrogressive, and as the model of our first world is our mother, all retrogressive tendencies are towards the mother, and therefore are disguised under the incest image. In both these ideas, the poet has represented in mythologic symbols the libido arising from the mother, and the libido striving backward toward the mother. There is a description in the 15th song, how Chabanos, Hiawatha's best friend, the amiable player and singer, the embodiment of a joy of life, was enticed by the evil spirits into ambush, fell through the ice, and was drowned. Hiawatha mourns for him so long that he succeeds with the aid of the magician in calling him back again. But the revivified friend is only a spirit, and he becomes a master of the land of spirits. Osiris, lord of the underworld, with 2 discovery battles again follow, and then comes the loss of a second friend, Quastid, and the embodiment of physical strength. In the 20th song occurs famine, and the death of Minnehaha foretold by the 2 Tactium guests from the land of death, and in the 22nd song, Hiawatha prepares her final journey to the Westland. Am going, O Nokomis, on a long and distant journey, to the portals of the sunset, to the regions of the home wind, of a northwest wind, keel wind. One long track and trail of splendor, down whose stream is down a river, westward, westward, Hiawatha sailed into the fiery sunset, sailed into the purple vapors, sailed into the dusk of evening. Thus departed Hiawatha, Hiawatha the beloved in the glory of the sunset and the purple mists of evening. To the regions of the home wind of the northwest wind, Keawind, to the islands of the blessed, to the kingdoms of Ponema, to the land of the hereafter. The sun victoriously arising tears itself away from the embrace and clasp from the enveloping womb of the sea, and sink carried in the maternal sea. Late night, the all-enveloping, the all-reproducing lights behind it the heights of midday, and all its glorious works. This image was first, and was profoundly entitled to become the symbolic carrier of human destiny. In the morning of life, man painfully tears himself loose from the mother, from the domestic hearth, to rise through battle to his heights. Not seeing his worst enemy in front of him, but bearing with him himself as deadly longing for the depths within, for drowning in his own source, for becoming absorbed into the mother, his life is a constant struggle with death, a violent and transitory delivery from the always lurking night. This death is no external enemy, but a deep personal longing for quiet and for the profound peace of non-existence, for a dreamless sleep in the ebb and flow of the sea of life. Even in his highest endeavor for harmony and equilibrium, for philosophic depths and artistic enthusiasm, he seeks death, immovably satiated and rest. If, like Periphas, he tarries too long in a place of rest and peace, he is overcome by torpidity. All the poison of the serpent paralyzes him for all time. If he is to live, he must fight and sacrifice his longing for the past in order to rise to his own heights. And having reached the noonday heights, he must also sacrifice the love for his own achievement, for he may not loiter. The sun also sacrificed its greatest strength in order to hasten outwards to the fruits of the autumn, which are the seeds of immortality, fulfilled in children and works in posthumous fame, and a new order of things, all of which in their turn begin and complete the sun's course over again. The Song of Hiawatha contains, as the extract show, a material which is very well adapted to bring into play the abundance of ancient symbolic possibilities latent in the human mind and to stimulate it to the creation of mythologic figures. But the products always contain the same old problem of humanity, which rise again and again in new symbolic disguise from the shadowy world of the unconscious. Thus Miss Miller is reminded through the longing of Chihuahua of another mythic cycle which appeared in the form of Wagner's Siegfried. Especially is this shown in the passage in Chihuahua's monologue, where he exclaims, "There is not one who understands me, not one who resembles me, not one who has a soul sister to mine." Miss Miller observes that the sentiment of this passage was the greatest analogy with the feelings which Siegfried experienced for Brunhilde. The analogy causes us to cast at glance the song of Siegfried, especially at the relation of Siegfried and Bernhard. It is a well-recognized fact of Bernhard that Valkyr gives protection to the birth of the incestuous of Siegfried, but while Sieglinde is the human mother, Brunhilde has the role of spiritual mother. However, unlike Hera towards Hercules, she is not a pursuer, but benevolent. This sin in which she is an accomplice by means of the help she renders, and the reason for her banishment by Wotan. The strange birth of Siegfried from the sister wife distinguishes him as Horus, as the reborn son, a reincarnation of a retreating Osiris, Wotan. The birth of a young son of a hero results indeed from mankind, who, however, are merely the human bearers of a cosmic symbolism. Thus the birth is protected by the spirit mother Hera or Lilith. She sends Sieglinde with the child in her womb, Mary's flight on the night journey on the sea, to the east. Onward hasten, turn to the east. O woman, thou cherished the sublimest hero of the world in thy sheltering womb. The motive of dismemberment is found again in the broken sword of Sigmund, which was kept for Siegfried. From the dismemberment, life is pieced together again, the Medea wonder. Just as a smith forges the pieces together, so in the dismembered dead again put together. This comparison is also found in Tamamos of Plato, the parts of a world joined together with pegs. In the Rig Veda 1072, the creator of the worlds, Bhartamasati, is a smith. Bhartamasati is a blacksmith welded the world together. The sword has the significance of a phallic sun power. Therefore a sword proceeds from the mouth of the apocalyptic Christ, that is to say, the protective fire, the word or the procreative logos. In Rig Veda, Bharpasani is also a prayer word which possessed an ancient creative significance. And the prayer of the singers, expanding from itself, became a cow, which was already there before the world. Dwelling together in the womb of this god, foster children of the same keeper are the gods. The Logos became a cow, that is to say, the mother who is impregnated with the gods. In Christian uncanonical fantasies, where the Holy Ghost is feminine significance, we have the well-known motive of the two mothers, the early mother, Mary, and the spiritual mother, the Holy Ghost. The transformation of the Logos into the mother is not remarkable in itself. It is the origin of the phenomenon. Fire speech seems to be the mother libido according to the discussion in the earlier chapter. The spiritual is the mother libido, the significance of the sword, and the Sanskrit conception. Tejas is probably partly determined by its sharpness, as is shown above in its connection with the libido conception. The mode of pursuit, the pursuing single need, analogous to Leto, is not here bound up with spiritual mother, but with Wotan, therefore corresponding to the Lenos legend where the father of a wife is also the pursuer. Wotan is also the father of Brunhilde. Brunhilde stands in peculiar relation to Wotan. Brunhilde says to Wotan, "Thou speakest to the will of Wotan by telling me what thou wishest. Who am I? I were not I thy will. Wotan, I take counsel only with myself when I speak with thee." Brunhilde is also somewhat the angel of the face, that creative will or word, emanating from God. Also the Logos, which became the child-bearing woman. God created the world through this word, that is to say, his mother, the woman who is to bring him forth again. He lays his own egg. This peculiar conception, it seems to me, can be explained by assuming that the libido overflowing into speech has persevered its sexual character to an extraordinary degree as a result of the inherent inertia. In this way, the word had to execute and fulfill all that was denied to the sexual wish, namely the return into the mother in order to attain eternal duration. The word fulfills this wish by itself, becoming the daughter, the wife, the mother of a god who brings him forth anew. Wagner has this idea vaguely in his mind in Wotan's lament over Bernhard. Now as she knew my inmost thought, none knew the source of my will as she. She herself was the creating womb of my wish, and so now she has broken the blessed union. Bernhard's sin is the favoring of Sigmund, but behind this lies incest that is projected into the brother-sister relation of Sigmund and Signalide. In reality and archaically expressed, Wotan the father has entered into his self-created daughter in order to rejuvenate himself. But this fact must, of course, be veiled. Wotan is rightly indignant with Bernhard, for she has taken the Isis role, and through the birth of the son has deprived the old man of his power. The first attack of the death serpent in the form of the sun, Sigmund Wotan has repelled. He has broken Sigmund's sword. But Sigmund rises again in a grandson. This inevitable fate is always helped by the woman, hence the wrath of Wotan. At Sigfrid's birth, Sigelnide dies as improper. The foster mother is apparently not a woman, but a chthonic god, a crippled dwarf who belongs to the tribe which renounces love. The Egyptian god of the underworld, the crippled shadow of Osiris, who celebrated a melancholy resurrection in the sexless semi-ape Harpocrates, is a tutor of Horus, who has to avenge the death of his father. Meanwhile, Bernhard sleeps the enchanted sleep like a Hirgamos upon a mountain, where Wotan has put her to sleep. With the magic thorn, Edda, surrounded by the flames of Wotan's fire, which is equal to libido, which wards off everyone. But mime becomes Siegfried's enemy, and wills his death through Fafnir. Here mime's dynamic nature is revealed. He is a masculine representation of the terrible mother, also a foster mother of the demonic nature who places the poisonous worm Typhon in her son Horus's path. Siegfried's longing for the mother drives him away from mime, and his travels begin with the mother of death and lead through vanquishing the terrible mother and to the woman. Siegfried off with the imp. Anear I would see him more. Might I but know what my mother was like, that will my thought never tell me. Her eyes' tender light surely did shine, like the soft eyes of a doe. Siegfried decides to separate from the demon which was the mother in the past, and he gropes forward with the longing directed towards the mother. Nature requires a hidden maternal significance for him. In the tones of nature he discovers a suggestion of a maternal voice and the maternal language. Siegfried, thou gracious birdling, strange art thou to me, dost thou in the wood here dwell? I would that I could take thy meaning. Thy song something would say, perchance of my loving mother. This psychology we have already encountered in Hiawatha by means of his dialogue with the bird. Bird like wind and arrow represents the wish, the winged longing. Siegfried entices Fafnir from the cave. His desires turn back to the mother at the chthonic demon, the cave-dwelling terror of the woods appears. Fafnir is the protector of the treasure in his cave. Lies the hoard, the source of life and power. The mother possesses the libido of a son, and jealously does she guard it. Translated into psychological language, this means the positive transference succeeds only through the release of a libido from the mother imago, the incestuous object in general. Only in this manner is it possible to gain one's libido, the incomparable treasure, and this requires a mighty struggle. Behold battle of adaptation. The Siegfried legend has abundantly described the outcome of the battle with Fafnir. According to the Edda, Siegfried eats Fafnir's heart and the seed of life. He wins the magic cap through whose power Alberich has changed himself into a serpent. This refers to the mode of casting the skin rejuvenation by means of the magic cap. One can vanish and assume different shapes. The vanishing probably refers to dying into the invisible presence that is existence in the mother's womb. A luck-bringing cap, amniotic covering, the newborn child occasionally wears over his head the caul. Moreover, Siegfried drinks the dragon's blood, which makes it possible for him to understand the language of birds, and consequently he enters into a peculiar relation with nature, a dominating position, the results of its knowledge, and finally wins the treasure. Hoard is a medieval and Old High German word with the meaning of collected and guarded treasure. Gothic Hus, Old Scandinavian, Germanic Hasna from the pre-Germanic Kfado, the concealed. Kluge adds to the Greek to hide or to conceal. The assumption of kludge is also supported in other directions, namely from the point of view of a primitive idea. There exists in Athens a sacred place, a temenos of G with the surname Olympia. Here the ground is torn open for about a yard in width, and they say after the flood at the time of Deucalion that the water receded here, and every year they throw into the fissure what meal kneaded with honey. We have observed previously that among the Erythropian pastries the form of the snakes and phalli was thrown into a crevice in the earth. This was mentioned in connection with the ceremonies of fertilizing the earth. We have touched slightly already upon the significant sacrifice in the earth crevice among the Washantis. A flood of death has passed characteristically into the crevice of the earth, that is back into the mother again. Because from the mother the universal great death has come in the first place. The flood is simply the counterpart of a vivifying and all-producing water. One sacrifices the honey cake to the mother so that she may spare one from death. Thus every year in Rome a gold sacrifice is thrown into the Lacus Curtinus in a former fissure in the earth, which could only be closed through the sacrificial death of Curtis. He He was the typical hero who was journeyed into the underworld in order to conquer the danger threatening the Roman state from the opening of the abyss. Kainu, a Morpheus, and the Amphimorpheus or Orpos, those healed through the temple of incubation through their gifts of gold, into the sacred well, of which Pausians say, if anyone is healed of a sickness through a saying of the oracle, then it is customary to throw a silver or gold coin into the well, because here Amorphos is ascended as a god. It is probable that the Orphic well is also the place of this catabasis, descend into the lower world. There were many entrances into Hades and Iniquity. Thus near Eleusis there was an abyss through which Adonis passed up and down when he kidnapped Cora. Dragon and maiden, the libido overcome by resistance, life replaced by death. There were crevices in the rocks through which souls could ascend to the upper world. Behind the temple of Caphonia and Hermine lay a sacred district of Pluto, with a ravine through which Hercules had brought up Cerberus. In addition, there was an Icarian lake. This ravine was therefore the entrance to the place where death was conquered. The lake also belongs here as a further mother symbol, for symbols appeared massed together, as they are surrogates and therefore do not afford the same satisfaction of desire as accorded by reality, so that the unsatisfied remnant of libido must seek still further symbolic outlets. The ravine in the Apergos in Athens was considered the seat of inhabitants of a lower world. An old Grecian custom suggests a similar ideal. Girls were sent into a cavern where a poisonous snake dwelt as a test of virginity. If they were bitten by a snake, it was a token that they were no longer chaste. We find the same motive again in the Roman legend of Saint Sylvester at the end of the 5th century. St. Peter revealed to Sylvester in a dream and advised him to close his door to the underworld with chains according to the model in Revelations. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him. The anonymous author of a writing, De Prohibitioninis, on the beginning of the 5th century, mentions a very similar legend. The hero battling with the dragon has much in common with the dragon, and also he takes over his qualities, for example, invulnerability. At the footnote show the similarity is carried still further. Sparkling eyes, sword in his mouth. Translated psychologically, the dragon is merely the son's repressed longing, striving towards the mother. Therefore the son is the dragon, as even Christ is identified with the serpent, which once upon a time Similius had controlled the snake plague in the wilderness. As a serpent he is to be crucified, that is to say, as one striving backward towards the mother, he must die, hanging or suspended on the mother tree. Christ and the dragon of the Antichrist are in the closest contact in the history of their appearance and their cosmic meaning. The legend of a dragon concealed in the Antichrist myth belongs to the life of a hero, and therefore is immortal. In none of the newer forms of myth are the pairs of opposites so perceptibly near as in that of Christ and Antichrist. That the dragon is only an artifice is a useful and delightfully rationalistic conceit, which is the most significant for that period. In this way, the dismal gods were effectually vulgarized. The schizophrenic insane readily made use of this mechanism in order to depreciate efficient personalities. One often hears the stereotype lament, it is all a play, artificial, made up, etc. A dream of a schizophrenic is most significant. He is sitting in a dark room, which has only a single small window, through which he can see the sky. The sun and moon appear, but they are only made artificially from oil paper. Denial of the delirious incest influence. The descent on the 365 steps refers to the sun's course to the cavern of death and rebirth. That this cavern actually stands in relation to the subterranean mother of death can be shown by a note in Molossus, the history of Anatok, who relates that Deucalion consecrated their crypt to Hecate, to which one descends by 365 steps. Cave mysteries seem to have been celebrated for Hecate and Samothrace as well. The serpent also played a great part as a regular symbolic attribute in service of Hecate. The mysteries of Hecate flourished in Rome towards the end of the 4th century, so that the two foregoing legends might indeed relate to her cult. Hecate is a real spectral goddess of night and phantoms, a Mar. She is represented as riding, and in a Hesiod occurs as the patron of riders. She sends the horrible nocturnal fear phantom, the Empusa of when Aristophanes says that she appears enclosed in a bladder swollen with blood. According to Libanos, the mother of Ashanis is called Empusa for the reason. Empusa, like Hecate, has peculiar feet. One foot is made of brass, the other of ass dung. Hecate has snake-like feet, which is in the triple form ascribed to Hecate, points to her phallic libido nature. In Tralles, Hecate appears next to Proparis. There is also a Hecate Aphroditus. Her symbols are the key, the whip, the snake, the dagger, and the torch. A mother of death dogs accompany her, the significance of which we have previously discussed at length. As guardian of the door of Hades and goddess of dogs, she's of threefold form and really identified with Cerberus. Thus Hercules, in bringing up Cerberus, brings the conquered mother of death into the upper world. As spirit mother moon, she sends madness, lunacy. This mythical observation states that the mother sends madness. By far the majority of cases of insanity consist, in fact, in the dominion of the individual by the material of the incest fantasy. In the mysteries of Cerberus, a rod was broken off. This rod protected the purity of virgins and caused anyone who touched the plant to become insane. We recognize in this the motive of the sacred tree and the mother must not be touched, an act of which only an insane person would commit. Hecate as Nightmare appears in the form of Empusa in a vampire role, or as Lamia as Devourer of Men. Perhaps also in that more beautiful guise, the Bride of Corinth, she is the mother of her all charms and witches. The patron of Medea, because the power of a terrible mother is a magical and irresistible working upward from the unconscious. In Greek syncretism, she plays a very significant role. She is confused with Artemis, who also has the surname, the one striking at a distance or striking according to her will, in which we recognize again her superior powers. Artemis is the huntress with hounds, and so Hecate, through confusion with her, becomes the wild nocturnal huntress. She has her name in common with Apollo from the standpoint of a libido theory. This connection is easily understandable, because Apollo merely symbolizes the more positive side of the same amount of libido. The confusion of Hecate with Brimo as subterranean mother is understandable, also with Persephone and Rhea, the primitive all-mother. Intelligible through the maternal significance is the confusion with Lilith, the midwife. Hecate is also the direct goddess of births, the multiplier of cattle, and goddess of marriage. Hecate, orphically, occupies the center of the world as Aphrodite and Gaia, even as the world's soul in general. On a carved gem, she is represented carrying the cross on her head. The beam on which the criminal was scourged to her, as the Roman trivia, the triple roads, or Shedwig, forked road, or crossway were dedicated. And where roads branch off or unite, sacrifices of dogs were brought her there. The bodies of the unexecuted were thrown, and the sacrifice occurs at the point of crossing. Etymologically, shide sheaf, for example, sword sheaf, sheaf for watershed, and sheaf for vagina, is identical with shiden, to split or to separate. The meaning of a sacrifice at this would therefore be as follows: to offer something to the mother at the place of junction or at the fissure. Compare this sacrifice to the Chthonic gods in the abyss. The temenos of G, the abyss and the well, are easily understood as the gates of life and death, past which everyone gladly accepts. And sacrifice is obelisk instead of his body, just as Hercules soothes Cerberus with the honey cakes. Compare with this the mythical significance of a dog. Thus the crevice at Delphi with the spring, Castilla, was the seat of the chthonic dragon Python, who was conquered by the sun hero Apollo. Python, incited by Hera, pursued Leda, pregnant with Apollo, and she on the floating island of Delos, nocturnal journey on the sea, gave birth to her child, who later slew the Python, that is to say, conquered in it the spirit mother. In Hierapolis, the temple was erected above a crevice, through which the flood was poured out, and in Jerusalem the foundation stone of the temple covered the great abyss. Just as Christian churches are frequently built over caves, grottos, wells, etc., and the Mithra grotto and all the other sacred caves up to the Christian catacombs, which owe significance not to the legendary persecutions but to the worship of the dead. We come across the same fundamental motive. The burial of the dead in a holy place in the garden of the dead, in cloisters, crypts, etc., is restitution to the mother, with a certain hope of resurrection by which such burial is rightly rewarded. The animal of death which dwells in a cave had to be soothed in early times for human sacrifices, later with natural gifts. Therefore the Attic custom gives to the dead, to pacify the dog of hell, the three-headed monster at the gate of the underworld. A more recent elaboration of natural gifts seems to be the obulus for the Charon, who is therefore designated by Rode as the second Cerberus, corresponding to the Egyptian dog-faced god Anubis. Dog and serpent of the underworld are likewise identical. In the tragedies, the entities are serpents as well as dogs. The serpent Tychon and Enchida are parents of the serpents, Hydra the dragon of Hesperides and Gorgo, and of the dogs Cerberus, Orpheus, and Scylla. Serpents and dogs are also protectors of a treasure. The chthonic god was probably always a serpent dwelling in a cave, and was fed. In the Asclepian of a later period, the sacred serpents were scarcely visible, meaning that they probably existed only figuratively. Nothing was left but the hole in which the snake was said to dwell. There the Avoli was placed, later the obulus was thrown in it. The sacred cavern in the Temple of Kos consisted of a rectangular pit upon which was laid a stone lid, with a square hole. This arrangement serves the purpose of a treasure house. The snake hole had become a slit for money, a sacrificial box, and the cave had become a treasure. That this development, which Herzog traces, agrees excellently with the actual condition is shown by discovering the temple of Asclepius and Hygeia in Ptolemais. An encoiled granite snake with arched neck was found. In the middle of the coil is seen a narrow slit, polished by usage, just large enough to allow a coin of 4 centimeters diameter at most to fall through. At the side are holes for handles to lift the heavy pieces, the under half which is used as a cover. The serpent, as protector of the hoard, now lies on the treasure house. The fear of the maternal womb of death has become the guardian of the treasure of life. That the snake in this connection is really a symbol of death, that is to say, the dread libido, results from the fact that the souls of the dead, like the chthonic gods, appear as serpents, as dwellers in the kingdom of the mother of death. This development of symbol allows us to recognize easily the transition of the originally very primitive significance of a crevice in the earth as mother to the meaning of treasure house, and can therefore support the etymology of hoard, or treasure, as suggested by Cluj, which means the innermost womb of the earth, or Hades. Cluj adds is of similar meaning cavity or womb. Prowitz does not mention this connection. Fick, however, compares New High German Hort Gothica Zud to Armenkuster Abdomen. The treasure which the hero fetches from the dark cavern is swelling life. It is himself the hero, newborn from the anxiety of pregnancy and the birth throes. Thus the Hindu fire-bringer is called Matravishan, meaning the one swelling in the mother. The hero striving towards the mother is the dragon, and when he separates from the mother, he becomes the conqueror of the dragon. This train of thought, which we have already hinted at previously in Christ and Antichrist, may be traced even into the details of Christian fantasy. There is a series of medieval pictures in which the community cup contains a dragon, a snake, or some sort of small animal. The cup is the receptacle, the maternal womb where the god resurrected in the wine. The cup is the cavern where the serpent dwells. The god who sheds his skin in the state of metamorphosis for Christ is also the serpent. These symbolisms are used in an obscure connection in Corinthians, verse Paul writes, "The Jews who were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, also reborn, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. They drank from the mother, the generative rock, birth from the rock, the milk of rejuvenation, the meat of immortality, and this rock was Christ, were identified with the mother because he is the symbolic representative of the mother libido. When we drink from the cup, we drink from the mother's breast immortality and everlasting salvation. Paul wrote of the Jews that they ate and then rose up to dance and to indulge in fornication, and then 23,000 of them were swept off by the plague of serpents. The remedy for the survivors, however, was the sight of a serpent hanging on a pole. From it was derived the cure. The dragon and the goblet. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break is not the communion of the body of Christ. For we being many are one bread and one body, for we are all partakers of one bread. Bread and wine are the body, and the blood of Christ the food of the immortals and the brothers of Christ, those who come from the same womb. We whom are reborn again from the mother are all heroes together with Christ, and enjoy immortal food. As with the Jews, so too with the Christians, there is imminent danger of unworthy partaking for this mystery, which is very closely related psychologically with the subterranean hierogamos of Eleusis. Involves a mysterious union of a man in a spiritual sense, which was constantly misunderstood by the profane, and was retranslated into his language, where mystery is equivalent to orgy and secrecy to vice. A very interesting blasphemer and sectitian of the beginning of the 19th century named Utachar was made the following comment on the Last Supper. The communion of the devil is in this brothel. All they sacrifice here they sacrifice to the devil and not to God. There they have the devil's cup and the devil's dish. There they have sucked the head of the snake. There they have fed upon the inquisitor's bread and drunken the wine of the wickedness. Utanar, and an adherent of or a forerunner of the theory of living one's own nature, he dreams of himself as a sort of prepactic divinity. He says of himself, "Black-haired, very charming and handsome in countenance, and everyone enjoys listening to thee on account of the amiable speeches which come from my mouth, therefore the maids love thee." He preaches the cult of nakedness. Yea, fools and blind men, behold, God has created man in his image, as male and female, and has blessed them and said, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and make it subject to thee. Therefore he has given the greatest honor to these poor members, and has placed them naked in the garden. Now are the fig leaves and the covering removed, because thou hast turned to the Lord, for the Lord is Spirit. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. There the clearness of the Lord is mirrored with the uncovered countenance. This is precious before God, and this is the glory of the Lord and the abandonment of our God, when you stand in the image and honor of your God, as God created you, naked and not ashamed. Who can ever praise sufficiently in the sons and daughters of the living God those parts of the body which are destined to procreate? In the lap of a daughter of Jerusalem in the gate of the Lord, and the just will go into the temple, there go to the altar. And in the lap of the sons of the living God is the water pipe of the upper part, which is a tube like a rod to measure the temple and altar. And under the water tube the sacred stones are placed as a sign and testimony of the Lord, who has taken to himself the seed of Abraham. Out of his seeds in the chamber of a mother god creates a man with his hands as an image of himself. Then the mother house and the mother chamber is opened in the daughters of a living God, and God himself brings forth a child through them. Thus God creates children from the stones, for the seed comes from the stones. History teaches in manifold examples how the religious mysteries are liable to change suddenly into sexual orgies, as they have originated from an overvaluation of the orgy. It is characteristic that the propaic divinity returns again in the old symbol of a snake, which as a mystery enters into faithful fertilizing and spiritualizing them, although it originally possessed a phallic significance. In the mysteries of Aphates, the festival is really celebrated with serpents, in which the animals were even kissed. Compare the caressing of a snake of Demeter in the Eleusinian mysteries. In the sexual orgies of a modern Christian sex, the phallic kiss plays a very important role. Unanar was an uncultivated, crazy peasant, and it is unlikely that the Ophitic religious ceremonies were known to him. The phallic significance is expressed negatively or mysteriously through the serpent, which always points to a secret related thought. This related thought connects with the mother, thus in a dream a patient found the following imagery. A serpent shot out from a moist cave and bit the dreamer in the region of the genitals. The dream took place at the instant when the patient was convinced of the truth of the analysis and began to free himself from the bond of his mother complex. The meaning is, I am convinced that I am inspired and poisoned by the mother. The contrary manner and expression and characteristic of a dream, at the moment when he felt the impulse to go forward, he perceived the attachment to the mother. Another patient had the following dream during a relapse, in which the libido was again wholly introverted for a time. She was entirely filled within by a great snake. Only one end of the tail peeped out from her arm. She wanted to seize it, but it escaped her. A patient with a very strong introversion complained to me that the snake was struck in her throat. The symbolism is also used in Ezekiel in the vision of a shepherd and the snake. And verily what I saw was like nothing I ever saw before. I saw a young shepherd, writhing, choking, twitching with a convulsed face, from whose mouth hung a black heavy serpent. Did I ever see so much disgust and pallid fear upon a countenance? Might he have been sleeping, and the snake crept into his mouth, there it bit him fast. My hand tore at the serpent, and tore in vain. I failed to tear the serpent out of his mouth. Then there cried out of me, "Bite, bite its head off, bite," I exclaimed. All my horror, my hate, my disgust, my compassion, all the good and bad cried out from me in one voice. Ye intrepid ones around me, solve for me the riddle which I saw, make clear to me the vision of the lonesome one. For it was a vision and a prophecy, what then I behold in parable. And who is it who is still to come? Yea, intrepid ones around me, solve for me the riddle which I saw, make clear to me the vision of the lonesome one. For it was a vision and a prophecy, what did then I behold in parable? And who is it who is still to come? Who is the shepherd into whose mouth crept the snake? Who is the man into whose throat all the heaviness of the blackest would creep? But the shepherd bit, as my cry had told him, he bit with a huge bite. Far away did he spit the head of the serpent and sprang up. No longer shepherd, no longer man, a transfigured being, an illuminated being who laughed. Never yet on earth did a man laugh as he laughed. O my brethren, I heard a laugh which was no human laughter, and now a thirst consumeth me, a longing that is never allayed. My longing for this laugh eats into me. Oh, how can I suffer still to live, and how now can I bear to die? The snake represents the introverting libido. Through introversion one is fertilized, inspired, regenerated, and reborn from the god. In Hindu philosophy, this idea of creative intellectual activity has ever cosmogenic significance. The unknown original creator of all things is, according to Rigveda 10:121, Prajapati, the Lord of Creation. In the various Brahmas, his cosmogenic activity was depicted in the following manner. Prajapati desired, I will procreate myself, I will be manifold. He transformed tapas. After he had performed tapas, he created these worlds. The strange conception of tapas is to be translated according to Dusan as he heated himself with his own heat. With the sense of he brooded, he hatched. Here the hatcher and the hatched are not two, but one and the same identical being. As H. Prabhajata is the egg produced from himself, the world egg from which he hatched himself. He creeps into himself, he becomes his own uterus, becomes pregnant with himself in order to give birth to the world of multiplicity. Thus Prajapati thought the way of introversion changed into something new, the multiplicity of the world. It is of especial interest to note how the most remote things come into contact. Dusan observes in the degree of the conception of tapas or heat becomes in hot India the symbol of exertion and distress. The tapoapatya began to assume the meaning of self-castigation and it became related to the idea of a creation as an act of self-renunciation on the part of Creator. Self-incubation and self-castigation and introversion are very closely connected ideas. The Zosimus vision mentioned above betrays the same train of thought, where it is said of a place of transformation. We have already observed that the place of transformation is really the uterus. Absorption in oneself, introversion is an entrance into one's own uterus and also at the same time ascetism. In the philosophy of the Brahmins, the world arose from this activity among the post-Christian Gnostics. It produced the revival and spiritual rebirth of the individual who was born into a new spiritual world. The Hindu philosophy is considerably more daring and logical, assumes that creation results from introversion in general, as in a wonderful hymn of Rigveda it is said, "What was hidden in the shell was born through the power of fiery torments." From this first arose love. As the gem of knowledge, the wise found the roots of existence and non-existence by investigating the heart's impulses. This philosophical view interprets the world as an animation of libido, and this must widely be accepted from the theoretic as well as the psychologic standpoint, for the function of reality is an instinctive function, having the character of biological adaptation. When the insane Scherber brought about the end of the world through his libido introversion, he expressed an entirely rational psychologic view, just as Schopenhauer wished to abolish through negation holiness, asceticism, the error of a primal will, for which the world was created, does not goeth say. You follow a false trail. Do not think that we are not serious. Is not the kernel of nature in the hearts of men. The hero who is to accomplish the rejuvenation of a world and the conquest of death is the libido, which, brooding upon itself in introversion, coiling as a snake around its own egg, apparently threatens life with a poisonous bite. In order to lead it to death, and from that darkness, conquering itself, gives birth to itself again. Nietzsche knows this conception. How long have you sat already upon your misfortune? Give heed lest you hatch an egg, a basilic egg, of your long travel. The hero is himself a serpent, himself a sacrificer, and sacrificed. The hero himself is of serpent nature. Therefore Christ compares himself with a serpent, therefore the redeeming principle of a word, that the Gnostic sect they styled itself the Ophite was the serpent. The serpent is the Agatho and Kako demon. It is indeed intelligible when in the Germanic saga they say that the heroes had serpent's eyes. I recall the parallel previously drawn between the eyes of a son of man and those of a Tyripian dragon. In the already mentioned medieval pictures, the dragon instead of a lord appeared in a cup. The dragon with changeful serpent glances guarded the divine mystery of renewed rebirth in the maternal womb. And as each the old, apparently long extinct idea is again revived. Ailing with tenderness, just as a thawing wind, Zephyrus sits waiting on his hill, sweetened and cooked in his own juice. Beneath his summits, beneath his ice he sits, weary and happy, a creator on his seventh day. Silence! It is my truth. From hesitating eyes, from velvety shadows, he Her glance meets mine, lovely, mischievous, the glance of a girl. She divines the reason of my happiness, she divines me, ha! What is she plotting? A purple dragon lurks in the abyss of her maiden glance. Woe to the Sephora, thou seemst like someone who has swallowed gold, the belly will be slit open. In this poem, nearly all the symbolism is collected, which we have elaborated previously from other connections. Distinct traces of a primitive identity of serpent and hero are still extant in the myth of Serapis. Serapis is himself half snake, half man. Originally, he probably was the Athenian snake of the citadel itself. As a buried god, he is like Erecathus, a chthonic snake god. Above his subterranean dwelling rises the Parthenon, the temple of a virgin goddess. Compare the analogous idea of a Christian church. The casting of the skin of God, which we have already mentioned in passing, stands in the closest relation to the nature of the hero. We have spoken already of a Mexican god who casts his skin. It is also told of Mani, the founder of a Manichaean sect, that he was killed, skinned, stuffed, and hung up. That is the death of Christ, merely in another mythological form. Marzines, who seemed to be substitute for Attis, the son-lover of Cybele, was also skinned. Whenever a Scythian king died, slaves and horses were slaughtered, skinned and stuffed, and then set up again. In Phrygia, the representatives of the father god were killed and skinned. The same was done in Athens with an ox who was skinned and stuffed and again hitched to the plow. In this manner, the revival of the fertility of the earth was celebrated. This readily explains the fragment of the Sabios Mysteries transmitted to us by Firmicus. The active, fructifying, upward striving form of libido is changed into the negative forces striving downwards towards death. The hero, as Zodion of spring, Ram Bull conquers the depths of winter, and beyond the summer solstice is attacked by the unconscious longing for death, and is bitten by the snake. However, he himself is the snake, but he is at war with himself, and therefore the descent in the end appears to him as the malicious inventions of the mother of death, who in this way wishes to draw him to herself. The mysteries, however, consolingly promise that there is no contradiction, or disharmony when life is changed into death, and as each too gives expression to this mystery. Here do I sit now, that is, I'm swallowed down by the smallest oasis, I opened up just yawning, its loveliest maw agape. Hail, hail to that whalefish, when he for his guest's welfare provide thus. Hail to his belly, if he had also such a lovely oasis belly. The desert grows, woe to him who hides the desert. Stone grinds on stone, the desert gulps and strangles. The monstrous death gazes, glowing brown, and chews his life in his chewing. Forget not, O man, burnt out by lust, thou art the stone, the desert, thou art death. The serpent symbolism of the Last Supper is explained by the identification of the hero with the serpent. The god is buried in the mother, as fruit of the field, as food coming from the mother, and at the same time as drink of immortality. He is received by the mystic, or as a serpent he unites with the mystic. All these symbols represent the liberation of the libido from the incestuous fixation for which new life is attained. The liberation is accomplished under symbols which represent the activity of the incest wish. It might be justifiable at this place to cast a glance upon psychoanalysis as a method of treatment. In practical analysis, it is important, first of all, to discover the libido lost from the control of consciousness. It often happens to libido as with the fish of Moses in a modern legend. It sometimes takes its course in a marvelous manner into the sea. Freud says in his important article, Zur Dynamik der Utenrag, the libido has retreated into regression and again revives the infantile images. This means mythologically that the sun is devoured by the serpent of the night. The treasure is concealed and guarded by the dragon. Substitution of a present mode of adaptation by an infantile mode, which is represented by the corresponding neurotic symptoms. Freud continues, Viver via analytic treatment follows its endeavors to seek out the libido again, to render it accessible to consciousness, and finally to make it serviceable to reality. Whenever the analytic investigation touches upon the libido, withdrawn into its hiding place, a struggle must break out. All the forces which have caused a regression of a libido will rise up as resistance against the work in order to preserve this new condition. Mythologically, this means the hero seeks the lost son, the fire, the virgin sacrifice, or the treasure, and fights the typical fight with the dragon, with the libido in resistance. As these parallels show, psychoanalysis mobiles a part of the life process, the fundamental importance of which properly illustrates the significance of this process. After Siegfried was slain the dragon, he meets the father Wotan plagued by gloomy cares for the primitive mother. Erda has placed him in a path of snake in order to enfeeble his son. He says to Erda, Wanderer, all wise one cares piercing sting by thee was planted in Wotan's dauntless heart. With fear of shameful ruin and downfall, filled was his spirit by tidings thou didst foretell. Art thou the world's wisest of women? Tell to me now, how a god may conquer his care. Erda, thou art not what thou hast said. It is the same primitive motive which we meet Wagner. The mother has robbed her son, the sun god, of the joy of life through a poisonous thorn, and deprives him of a power which is connected with the name. Isis demands the name of the god. Erda says, Thou art not what thou hast said. But the wanderer was found the way to conquer the fatal charm of the mother, the fear of death. The Eternal's downfall no more dismays me, since their doom I willed. I leave to thee, loveliest while sung, gladly my heritage now to the ever young. In gladness yieldeth the god. These wise words contain in fact the saving thought. It is not the mother who has placed a poisonous worm in our path, but our libido itself wills to complete the course of the sun to mount from morn to noon, and passing beyond noon to hasten towards evening, not at war with itself, but willing the descent in the end. Nazich Zephora teaches, I praise thee, my death, the free death which comes to me because I want it. And when shall I want it? He who has a goal and an heir wants death at the proper time for his goal and his heir. And this is the great noonday, when a man in the middle of the course stands between man and Superman, and celebrates his path towards evening as his highest hope. Because it is the path to a new morning. He who is setting will bless his own going down, because it is a transition, and the sun of his knowledge will be at high noon. Siegfried conquers the father Wotan and takes possession of Bernhard, the first object that he sees in her horse. Then he believes that he beholds a mail-clad man. He cuts to pieces the protecting coat of mail of the sleeper. Overpowering when he sees it as a woman, terror seizes him. My heart doth falter and faint. On whom shall I call, that he may help me? Mother, mother, remember me. Can this be fearing? O mother, mother, thy dauntless child, a woman lieth asleep, and she now has taught him to fear. Awaken, awaken, holiest maid. Then life from sweetness of lips will I win me, e'en though I die in a kiss. And the duet which allows the mother is invoked. O mother, hail, who gave thee thy birth. The confession of Brunhild is especially characteristic. O knewest thou joy of the world, now I have ever loved thee. Thou wert my gladness, my care wert thou. Thy life I sheltered, or it was thine, or thou were born. My shield was my guard. The pre-existence of a hero and the pre-existence of Burnside as his wife-mother are clearly indicated from this passage. Siegfried says in confirmation, Then death took not my mother, bound in sleep did she lie. The mother Imago, which is a symbol of a dying and resurrected libido, is explained by Burnside to the hero as his own will. Thyself am I, if blessed I be in thy love. The great mystery of the Logos entering into the mother of rebirth is proclaimed with the following words by Burnside. O Siegfried, Siegfried, conquering light, I love thee ever. For I divined the thought that Wotan had hidden, the thought that I dared not to whisper, that all unclearly glowed in my bosom, suffered and strove, for which I flouted him who conceived it, for which in penance prisoned I lay, while thinking it not and feeling only, for in my thought, oh, should you guess it? Was only my love for thee. The erotic smiles which now follows distinctly reveal the motive of rebirth. Siegfried. A glorious flood before me rolls. With all my senses I only see its buoyant gladdening billows. Though in the deep I find not my face, burning I long for the water's balm, and now as I am, spring into the streams, O might its billows engulf me in bliss. The motive of plunging into the maternal water of rebirth or baptism is here fully developed. An allusion to the terrible Mother Imago as the mother of heroes, who teaches them fear is to be found in Bernheid's word. The horsewoman who guides the dead to the other side. Fearest thou, Siegfried? Fearest thou not, the wild furious woman? The orgiastic acid moritus resounds in Bernheid's words. Laughing let us be lost, laughing go down to death. And in the words, light-giving love, laughing death, is to be found the same significant contrast. The further destinies of Siegfried are those only of the Invictus, the spear of a gloomy, one-eyed Hagen strikes Siegfried's vulnerable spot. The old sun who has become the god of death, the one-eyed Wotan, smites his offspring and once again ascends its eternal rejuvenation. The course of the invincible sun has supplied the mystery of human life with beautiful and impressionable symbols, becomes a conforming fulfillment of all the yearning for immortality, of all desire of mortals for eternal life. Man leaves the mother the source of libido and is driven by the eternal thirst to find her again and to drink renewal from her, whilst he completes his cycle and returns again into the mother's womb. Every obstacle which obstructs his life path and threatens his ascent wears the shadowy features of a terrible mother who paralyzes his energy with the consuming poison of a stealthy retrospective longing. In each conquest he wins again the smiling, loving, and life-giving mother images which belong to the intuitive depths of human feeling, the features of which have become mutilated and irrecognizable through the progressive development of the surface of the human mind. The stern necessity of adaptation works ceaselessly to obliterate the last traces of these primitive landmarks of a period of the origin of the human mind and replace them along lines which are to denote more and more clearly the nature of real objects.